So we're going to talk, first of all, good morning everybody. Thank you very much for coming along. I hope you have a fun day. I've been, and it's great to be here back in Israel. It's always a pleasure coming here. Tel Aviv's a great spot to be for a few days. And I've been asked today to speak on a topic near to my heart, procurement integrity. And we're going to take so this is not a sales exercise on the part of SAS, okay? But I've been asked to give my thoughts on the use of analytics to try and identify fraud, waste, error, and abuse as it occurs within the procure-to-pay cycle. Okay, so I'll do my best. Let me see, does this work? It does. Okay, awesome. Right. So what we'll do is a little bit of introductions. We'll go through what we at SAS have built. What I guess the really big question that I get asked all over the world is, how much money does this bit of software thing deliver to us? Because kind of like that's what it pretty much comes down to, right? So I'm gonna, with lots of caveats, have a go at answering that question for you. Okay. I'll talk about where it's been deployed, kind of how it works, some projects, some case studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have, either now or afterwards. So I hope you enjoy it, okay? So just briefly in terms of, in terms of my background, I come from Ireland. I trained in physics. I qualified as a chartered accountant. What's going on here? What have I pressed? Ah, the mouse. There we go. Thank you. I trained as a chartered accountant back in the day with a company called Arthur Andersen. Young people may never have heard that name. Old people will know all about it. Arthur Andersen was a great accountancy practice that went up in a cloud of smoke because of fraud committed by a small group of partners in Texas when they were auditing Enron. So I and 15,000 of my colleagues got fired because of fraud back in the day. I worked with Andersen Consulting, which was the predecessor. So the not so young people here will remember Andersen Consulting. The young people here will recognize Accenture. Accenture became Andersen Consulting. So I go way, way, way back. And I lived in the Middle East for 10 years back in the day, looking after financial services. And then a small company I owned got bought by Detica. You may have never heard of that. They were a specialist national security analytics company on the London Stock Exchange. So they got bought by British Aerospace and blah, blah, blah. But I worked for many years in national security, building surveillance platforms using SAS for use by intelligence services. And then SAS hired me, and here we are. So that's where I come from. I've worked all over the world, and if you've, again, any questions, I'll do my best, okay? So why are we actually talking about procurement integrity now? So these are just my opinions. So the first thing is, I'm here to represent the shareholder or the taxpayer. I'm here representing the money that you have invested in equities somewhere, and your pension fund that has invested in equities and fixed income products and so on and so forth, and maybe down the line your tax dollars. But when I go to a client, I'm here to protect the owner's money, right? Shareholders' money. So what I'm trying to do is squeeze out fraud, waste, error, and abuse that occurs in most organizations in order to improve, ultimately, your working capital circumstances. I want to deliver to our clients, improved cash management, cash flow, dollars in the bank that you would otherwise not have physically available. Okay? You're spending the money incorrectly. I'd like to find out where that incorrect spend occurs and return it back to the pot. That's what we're trying to do. Okay? I'll talk about guidance later, but I promise you the number in terms of percent of procurement outlays per year. So think what it is your company spends every year. It's somewhere between 0 and 10%. And I'll talk to you later how I work out that number, but it's not 0. Okay, so for sure there's something going on. There's also emerging compliance. Now, I don't know the nitty-gritty of Israel, but in many countries now, back in the day you had a thing called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, came in the United States, and there's a similar legislation in most countries. And that basically is, don't bribe the government. So if you're a government official and you're involved in procurement and you take a bribe, you've committed a criminal offense, you will go to jail. And as suppliers involved in that behavior, you will also go to jail. So there will be some version of something like that here. So there is a regulatory environment, particularly in public procurement, centered on fraud and embezzlement. However, these days, in my opinion, there's an emerging world which is a sort of space that the banks used to do, and it's called compliance, sanctions, anti-money laundering, know your customer, know your supplier, all that sort of stuff. So once upon a time, back in the old days, it was the problem of the bank. When the bank opened an account, they had to do due diligence on, who the account holders are and all that stuff, monitoring transactions. Now, it's increasingly leaking into the corporate world. You need to know your suppliers. You onboard a supplier today, everything's fine, you set it up on your supplier master file, off you go. But the shareholding can change, and all of a sudden, 20% of your major supplier is a Cayman Island trust whose ultimate beneficiary owner is a sanctioned entity. Okay, are you going to know about that? Probably not, but we can help you find when those circumstances start to present. And then ultimately, what I'm trying to do is add another layer of enterprise risk management. That's what it boils down to at the end of the day. Risk management is always about layers of things that cumulatively add on each other, and this is just another solution. We talked briefly about this survey. So we did SAS did this survey with the ACFE, if you've ever heard of them. They're out of Miami. And surprise, surprise, when asked, the major risk areas where I am concerned where money leaves our corporate bank account. I mean, it's hardly rocket science, okay? So these first two areas about procurement and payments, ultimately it's money leaving our bank account. We'd like to make sure that when that happens, things are cool. And then related to it, if you go down, my eyes aren't what they used to be, but we've got travel and expenses and things like that. It's kind of all follow the money, right? So, and by the way, I am the person who designed and built this solution, together with a colleague called Yolandi Bird, who's not here today. The two of us built version 1 of this back in the day. It started, actually, fun fact, started on a plane ride back from Manila, of all places, to Dubai when we wrote it out. Anyway, so when we started this, we thought, let's just keep it simple. Like, where do you direct controls and analytics? Where do you start? Answer, where the money is. So most money leaves your companies through payroll and procurement. Forget about capital market stuff. But that's where the money leaves the bank account. So let's just make sure that we control that process to the extent that we can. We saw this earlier. The procurement integrity platform really deals with those areas highlighted in red there. So what have SAS built? So this is just what we've built, but we have built an enterprise-wide surveillance platform using SAS technologies. Okay. Enterprise-wide. So that means we can ingest most of all of your data into an analytics environment, and we have built algorithms that look at your data to hunt out potential fraud, waste, error, and abuse. That's what you're paying me to do. Okay, that's what we do. Now, your decision is, how aggressive do you want to be? So I go to some places, the UK. They have a whole bunch of rules about data protection. So they say, Chris, you can only look at the data out of our SAP or Oracle financial platform. So purchase orders, purchase requisitions, good receive note, accounts payable, blah, blah, blah. Standard stuff. And maybe we'll give you HR, human resource records. Like, here are all our employees, here are their bank accounts, here are their personal data. Okay, but you appreciate that data protection is a big thing, right? I go to other parts of the world where they say, yeah, so let's take I want every single email you've written for the last 5 years, put it into the pot. If your company supplies you your mobile phone, that means they get the bill. And that means they know who you've phoned, when and for how long, and how many phone calls you've received and from what number. Throw that into the pot. Some places give me the CCTV. Okay? So, you know, it's like a mixing desk at the rock, you know, like a rock concert, you know, those mixing desks with lots of sliders and knobs and things. You have to decide what data goes into the pot and how aggressively. Do you want to give your enterprise data a colonoscopy or not? I mean, I hate to be blunt, but we're adults, right? So there is no right answer for this. This is a matter for your legal and compliance department. But I'm telling you, if you want us to give you a colonoscopy, no problem. And surprise, surprise, when you start putting more data in, the results are a little bit different from if we narrow things down. Okay? But I totally get it that what works in one country and one client will never see the light of day in somewhere else. That's just life. But from our point of view, the tech stack that we've built will deal with both situations and everything in between. Okay? So that's the first thing. I reckon we look at about $1 trillion when I add up our clients at the moment per year. Over $1,000 billion runs through our data in various. So I hope that gives you some comfort that the analytics work. We've built a load of stuff out of the box that plugs in real quick, so our time to value is short. We normally get results in about, from when we get the data, 3 months maybe, something. It's a team of 2 or 3 people. It's not. You know, we're not putting in SAP here, right? And the investigators like it, and blah blah blah. It was built. I decided back in the day I was going to start with SAP. And now we've got Oracle. And the reason I like SAP is that when you go to a bank, every bank is like Frankenstein. Every bank has got application A, B, C, D, E. They're all different. And it's very difficult for us to get the data we need from a situation where everyone's different. But with SAP and Oracle, who here has SAP at home? Everyone? A few, okay. SAP at client A, the data model is exactly the same as SAP at client B and client C and client D. Because if you start changing it, you run the risk of invalidating your warranty, invalidating your support, and putting at risk upgrade down the line. So you tend not to mess about with the data environment, which means the plumbing I have into SAP at client A is lift and shift and put it into client B. And all that means is that it saves you a lot of time and money. Okay? Value. How much? So I'm just going to go out on a limb here. My estimate is that in public sector, for every $100 the public procurement office spend in 1 year, somewhere between 3 and 10% is potentially at risk. Okay? And for private sector, the number's lower. It's between 0.5% and 3%. That's my, now you can shoot me down, that's my guess, and it's empirical. Because if you you go to Google and start trying to find this stuff, you'll get precisely nowhere. Because this is not published. Not just from SAS, from anyone. I mean, no one publishes how much they've lost from fraud. It's just a fact unless it comes out in court. But I've done this many, many times in many, many countries, and these are my views. Okay? Some important caveats. I'm just a computer guy. My job is to show up with a bit of software, stick it into your environment, and look at your data and generate an alert in a timely manner. Your job is to have a human being look at the results and decide what they're going to do. Are you going to pursue an alert that has a $50 value? Or are you going to say, nah, waste of time? So I'm only going to look at stuff that's $100,000. Everything else I don't care about. Well, if that's where you are, the value you're going to get is less, right? Potentially than if if you've got a team of investigators and your policy is to be very aggressive, and I am going after the $15 because it's deterrence. So the investigative resource bit is absolutely critical. If you think you're going to put in something like SAS or one of our competitors and have like 3 people look at the results and you're going to get this value, you're deluding yourself. You must have a budget for people to work the alerts. Okay? The second thing is value comes in hard and soft terms. So what we do when we turn it on, the first year we find a lot typically. Then you do something about it and it kind of goes down, right? So we find not so much fraud. Fraud's very difficult to find and prove, but waste, error, and abuse. So your SAP system isn't correctly configured. The user permissions are a little stale. That policy that you've written is a bit ambiguous, and you kind of tighten everything up. And the result, or the alert volume starts to decline a little bit over time. But what value is given to you by finding an area where your policy is ambiguous, it's not very well written. People are abusing it because whoever wrote it didn't write it very clearly. So, that's very difficult for me to put a dollar on, but it's not zero. And the other thing is never underestimate the importance of deterrence. Maybe in Israel you have an expression. Ronald Reagan, the old president, he used to say when he was negotiating with the Russians, trust but verify. So I trust employees, but I'm going to verify what you do. And what we find, in SAS we did this. What we find is that when people know that there is a surveillance platform operating and it's there every day, 24/7, they start changing their behavior. You will never eliminate, there'll always be some who try and, push it. But we find that the deterrence value is extremely important. And I cannot put a dollar on that. But it's not zero. And then the other thing is culture and jurisdiction. What stays in this room, okay? So I go to some places like the government of South Africa. We worked at ESCOM. You might have heard of a thing called state capture under Jacob Zuma. ESCOM, which is the equivalent of IEC, was looted. South Africa's electricity generator has been starved of funds and they have had chronic fraud and embezzlement. I go to Nigeria. I've many African countries. There is a culture there where stealing from your employer is kind of just done. You go to Finland, and that never happens. Okay? I choose Finland because it's #1 on the corruption index, like the cleanest country in the world. But I have been and done that. We work with like Finnair, the airline. It just doesn't happen. So I have no idea where Israel is. Okay? It could be worse. You could be Ireland, but anyway, you know what I mean, right? Right? You know what I mean, right? So there's this sort of overarching: how bad are we? And how much where's the limit? So if in your world culturally it's okay to steal from your employer, then you're going to be closer to 10% in public, but you may not be. And the other thing is the culture of the organization you work in. I go to some places and they really care about this stuff. Okay? It's important. Like, we're adults, we're in charge. Like, we have to manage shareholder money. I go to other clients and they say, nah. And sometimes I'm wondering, when I speak to the, see something officer and I get, no, we're not interested. I don't know, maybe that person's taking a bribe. So I've seen it all. I'm just telling you, the culture of your organization, whether you actually deep down care about looking after shareholder funds, counts. And If we care, then the number will be a little lower. If we don't care, the number will be a bit higher, right? So anyway, those are my guidances. I'm not in the guarantee business. A million things can go wrong, but our guys that show up, we've seen it all before, and we will squeeze the juice out of the lemon that's in your data as much as we possibly can. Just in the interest of time, we normally break our projects into phases. So I've just put up some of the some more common areas of internal fraud and abuse. We cover all of these. So we have a library of rules. We normally put in about 25 in the first phase, say 3 to 4 months just to get you going. We've learned so much over the years about where to start. So again, depends, do you want to be an attack dog or are you a poodle? It's up to, I mean, with all due respect to poodle, you know. But like, if you want to be really aggressive, well, fine, we can be really aggressive. We'll get the aggressive stuff out. So we normally break it into phases. We start with scenarios and then you work down into modeling. Modeling is complicated, but can be done. The way we do it is very straightforward. It's not rocket science. We take your data, we clean it up, we ingest it, we bring it into an analytics environment. We can do some modeling and AI around it if that's what you want to do. We provide a platform for the investigators, those human beings I talked about, to actually, you know, work alerts, explore data, blah, blah, blah. And then we can disseminate the results out to a user community. So the architecture, the logic, the software, the techniques, all proven. Most of it came from financial services, to be honest, because that's just where I hung out for a long time. So we took best practices, mainly from the banks, insurance companies, and capital markets, and brought it to bear into this space. So if you don't like it, blame me, but that's what we do, okay? Just briefly on modeling, you've heard a lot of, everywhere you go these days, the AI, artificial intelligence is being talked about. We do support it. You just need to be a wee bit cautious about it because it's broken up. Obviously, there's a data bit to it. I don't have time to get into all of this now, but data is obviously central to this, and the quality of data is central to this. Third-party data is really important. But you obviously have, if you're going to go down that road, you just have to get ready for the world of data and data engineers. There's a bunch of mathematical techniques that we can bring to bear. Mostly in SAS, we do the important ones. And then the whole management of the models that you deploy into production needs to be carefully thought through. So it's a conversation for another day, but I just want you to know that we can support it with the technology. You just need to be careful that quality of people is really important in this stuff. Just finishing up, these are some of the clients that we've got globally. IEC's on this. We've worked all over the world, Far East, Middle East, North, South America, blah, blah, blah. So people who buy our stuff these days are getting the cumulative experience of these clients, okay? And I would say 80% SAP. R3, R4, HANA, the lot. The people who use this, no particular order, tend to be finance, compliance, audit, maybe procurement sometimes. So it's imagine if I generate an alert in the morning. Here's the alert. And I found that there's a $1 million purchase orders going to a supplier, and the owner of that supplier is the spouse of the chief technology officer. Who looks at that alert? So we've built this sort of railway junction box thing where you can start directing alerts based on what's in the alert to whom and do it all in a secured manner. Just anecdotally, by the way, give you an idea of my single today, touch wood, the most valuable single alert I've ever found was $178 million from one alert. It was in South Africa. It was not ESCOM. It was another one. 178 million bucks. The funniest alert I've ever had was quite recently in New York, actually, where an employee using their corporate credit card bought a dog. I kid you not. We laughed so hard about that, but yeah, they bought a little dog and put it through expenses. Have any of you bought a dog? In Copenhagen, the city of Copenhagen gave cards to teachers for supplies. Go and buy, paper and crayons and things for the children. We found, I think it was 203 cases of Heineken. I mean, it's not much money. It's funny, right? But it's kind of not, And just some advice, travel and expense cards. If any of you, with work, you get a credit card to buy like the airplane ticket and things like that. And if you use a product called SAP Concur, I don't know if any of you ever heard of Concur. It's a platform where you book tickets and things. We have a client who... okay. We have a client who the whole project, phase one of the project, cost them $6 million. They paid us a bit, their costs, an Azure environment, blah, 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 $6 million. They paid for it in the first 2 months of operation, looking at credit card transactions, corporate credit cards, just in the United States. And they have 15 other, geos. And they started in the US because the auditor thought that there might be a slight issue. So they clawed back $6 million in 2 months from employees in 1 year who'd abused the credit card that their employer had given. Like buying personal trips, buying trips for your spouse, going to sending the kids on the soccer team, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just going to finish up here. It's just some brief stats. So this is, excuse me, this is just looking at over here, suppliers versus alerts. So there is a correlation. More suppliers generally means more alerts, but not necessarily as hard as these are some of the actual numbers by industry that we've got here. A couple of others. So numbers of suppliers, total numbers of alerts, same thing. And then just to finish up, these are some, I just had one of my colleagues pull some numbers from a few of our clients and industries, roll them up. So these are just some of the numbers that we look at. I just put it here for comparison purposes. I don't know what your numbers are. And you can sort of see invoice volumes over here on the left-hand side. So just in finishing, my biggest client, hopefully, they signed the contract. We just signed a contract, $805 billion US per year. That's going to be my biggest. The next one, we're going to have a video from a client in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom government, they have a program called High Speed 2, HS2. They're building high-speed railway around the country. Their budget is 105 billion pounds, about 130 billion US dollars. So we won that last year. They looked at everyone in the market. They chose us. So when I get that 805 billion, it'll be $2 trillion that we're looking at every year, which I'm very proud of. So I just put these numbers out to give you, I hope, some comfort. It's not vaporware. This stuff works. There's a real business problem which we can mostly fix. We'll never eliminate it all, unfortunately. But life is all about baby steps. And we can incrementally make things better for you and your colleagues. And I'm done. So listen, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, come see me at the end. It's a fun place to hang out. And I promise you, if you go to your finance people and say, do they want 3% of their procurement expenditure delivered back in cash annually? They're going to say, that's a great idea. Let's have a go. So I hope we get a chance to help you. Sometimes we don't, not everyone gets that number. Sometimes you get more. It's a risk. You have to understand that. But I think on balance, it's an educated risk. And if 3% is a number that's meaningful to you, then give it a go. Okay, thank you.